name is Jenny and welcome to my channel. So for today's video, I'll be doing the second part of my April book haul. In this haul, I will be talking about a play, a book of poems, and some non-fiction titles that I have purchased in April. So let's get into the books. A lot of the authors that I will mention are Canadian authors. That is because I enjoy reading books by Canadian authors and I want to support my fellow Canadians. So let me start with the play that I mentioned. So this one is called La Belle Sœur. La Belle Sœur, and it is by Michel Tremblay. Michel Tremblay is a well-known French-Canadian author, and he wrote this play in the 1970s, and it became one of his first major theatrical productions in Quebec. And so this play recently was produced as a musical in my city, and although I was not able to attend any of the performances, I still became interested in learning more about the play itself and what impact it has uh, on Quebec culture as well as on the rest of Canada. And so this play looks at La Belle Sœur, or the Belle Sisters, who are working class women who enjoy collecting stamps. And one day they find the jackpot stamp that wins them millions. And so that is pretty much the plot of the play. As that is all I really know about the plot of the play, and so I look forward to reading the play for myself and to find out more. So the next book that I have to show you is some poems, and this one is the complete English poems by John Donne. So I have read a few poems by John Donne in a class that I recently took on 17th century English poetry, and so John Donne lived and wrote in the 17th century in England, and he is best known for his religious poetry and writing. One subject that he explored in his writing is trying to come to an understanding of the best ways to express devotion to God through prayer. And John Donne was a Catholic at a time when there was major conflicts that existed between Catholics and Protestants in Britain. And although I myself am not Catholic or Christian, I became interested in reading his poems through the class that I took, and while I only had a chance to read a few of his poems, I became interested enough to want to find a copy of his poetry to read further and to come to a greater understanding of his writing and his impact on English poetry. And so the next a few books that I have to talk to you about are non-fiction titles, and I'll start with this one. This one is "Pay No Heed to the Rockets" by Marcello Di Cinzio, and the tagline or subtitle is called "Palestine in the Present Tense." And so this is a book that looks at poets, authors, librarians, and booksellers of Palestine. And although there may be other books that have been written on Palestine, they tend to focus on the politics and conflicts of the region. Um, there are a few that actually look at the literary lives of Palestinians. And so, along with looking at great literary giants in Palestinian literature, such as Mahmoud Darwish and Ghassan Kanafani, the author also looks at contemporary writers. And so this will be the third book that I will read by Marcello Di Cinzio. I have read two other books by him. The first book that I read by him is called Walls, Travels Along the Barricades. That book is a bit of a travelogue in which the author went to different places around the world where he found um, physical barriers that were built between different communities, such as the wall that exists between Palestine and Israel. And so the other book that I have read by Dicintio is called Poets and Palavins. I don't know exactly how this pronounce that last word, but essentially that book is about Iranian culture and the connection that exists in Iran between poetry and wrestling. And so, yeah, this is the third book that I will read by Dicintio, and this was released in this year in 2018 and was published by a Canadian company called Goose Lane. The next book that I have to show you is also by a Canadian author, and this one is Women Who Dig by Trina Moyes. And so this book has the tagline, not the tagline, the subtitle is Farming Feminism and the Fight to Feed the World. And so this looks at women in various different farming communities around the world. Trina travels to many places, from including Uganda, the United States, and Cuba, looking at how various women are empowering themselves and their communities through farming. And while there is a great percentage of women who are involved with farming, they are often overlooked and unappreciated, and not giving the credit for the work that they do in sustaining their communities. And so, uh, um, uh, through Trina Moy's travels, she was able to put together a glossy magazine style book with wonderful photos, such as this one, and the photos were taken by KJ Dakin. And so, yeah, so I was able to attend the book launch of book reading of this book with the author in attendance speaking about the book as well. And the book, the event was hosted by Marcello Dicintio, um, uh, which is who is the author that I have already spoken about, who wrote the previous book. And so, yeah, so through that personal connection, I look forward to reading these two books as soon as I can. So I have another book by a Canadian author, and this one is Forgiveness by Mark Sakamoto. And so this is a look at the experiences of Mark Sakamoto's grandparents uh, as they have different experiences of World War II. And so when the Second World War broke out, Ralph McLean left his community in eastern Canada to volunteer to serve uh, in the Canadian military um, in Asia. And meanwhile, in Vancouver, Mitsu Sakamoto saw her family and her stable community torn apart after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Ralph was captured by the Japanese and would spend the war in prison camps, enduring sickness, starvation, and beatings. Back in Canada, Mitsu and her family were expelled from their community, living on the west coast of Canada, and they were forced to move into the interior province of Alberta, where they would have to live by working on other people's land for $1 a day. And so this is a story of how these two individuals would come together as a family when they end up living in the same community, and Ralph's daughter and Mitsu's son would fall in love. And so, and I guess this is a journey of discovery and trying to come to terms with a shared Canadian identity, even though um, Ralph Ralph McLean and Mitsu Sakamoto may have started seeing uh, each other as enemies. And so the next book that I have to show you is this time it is by an American author, and this one is The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. So this is a book on urban planning, and it is Jane Jacobs' critique of the um, the practices and short-sightedness of urban planners of that of her era. Um, Through this book, Jane Jacobs launched many great conversations on urban planning. She discusses in this book what makes streets safe or unsafe, and what constitutes a neighborhood, and how it serves the larger uh, urban landscape. She also discusses why some neighborhoods remain poor and while others um, revive themselves. Um, she, yeah, there are many other subjects related to urban life and urban planning that she discusses, and basically this book launched many great conversations on urban planning in the United States and around the world, and it has led to the creation of Jane's Walks, which are different how different communities and neighborhoods organize tours and walks around neighborhoods that often take place on weekends in May, and in these tours is um, residents are encouraged to get to know their neighborhoods better, get to know the history behind their neighborhoods, as well as the um, urban planning developments that have occurred over time. And so I have one more book in this book haul, and this one is also by a Canadian author, and it is Nixon in China by Margaret Macmillan. And so this is the second book that I have by Margaret Macmillan. Margaret Macmillan is a historian who has taught in the UK, and she previously wrote a book called Paris 1919 that looks at the political aftermath of World War One. And so this book is a look at the meeting that took place between Richard Nixon and the Chinese leaders um, in the 1970s. That meeting in 1972 would become a historical moment, as it became the first time that a serving American president went to China. And so it changed the relationship that existed between China and the United States, and it uh, uh, would affect uh, affect the how the relationship would evolve um, going forward into the 20th century and the 21st century. And so yeah, it's a bit of a history book, and I don't know too many other details other than what I have been able to read from the summary in the inside flap of the book. And so I look forward to reading this book sometime soon, as I am studying a major study of Chinese history and culture um, on my own. And so, yeah, so this is that's that. If we come to the end of this library, not library hall, this April book haul, and I'll just show you all the books again that I have acquired in the month of April that are non-fiction books, poetry, and a play. So hopefully I'll be able to find time to read all these as soon as I can. And thank you for watching this video. Have a great night.